All right. Would you like to go?
You can do it.
All right. Welcome to another borderline exciting little Microsoft users group. I'm Craig Stein. I'm one of the founders of Mirazon, and we started LouMug back, about 12, 14 years ago now. Long time ago. Since we've become global now, or at least national, maybe we ought to reconsider LouMug, and we could be like a USA Mug or something like that. A smug. So thanks for everyone for attending. Quick show of hands, how many of this is your first time attending LouMug? You can raise your hand by clicking up in the. All right, we got 5. Awesome. Well, we are so glad to have you. LouMug is a forum for computer professionals. We have different topics every month, and we are always looking for new topics. But LouMug is made possible by our sponsors. We'd like to special thanks to our platinum sponsors, Fortinet and Virtual Telecom and Veeam and Dell EMC. And if you would go to our website at loumug.org, you will see links to find out all about these great companies and the products that they provide. So, whoops, what in the world did I just do? Okay, that's funny.
I guess we got new features from Teams.
I think so. Oh, wow, that's kind of really strange. Let me fix that. How embarrassing. I have no idea what that just did. Oh, there we go. We're back. All right. So if you would like to, you're welcome to turn on your video, as it says here. And if you'd like to see the presentation in full screen, you can right click and say click or fit to frame as you see the dialogue there. And you can also type questions in the chat window, or you can raise your hand and if you would like to ask a question, and we will. Tony's pretty good at taking questions on the fly, but you do have full mic capabilities, but please respect that awesome power. And if you are chatty, we reserve the right to mute you. Isn't that right, Leah? Okay, awesome. So today's agenda, we're doing the welcome, all right, and sponsors announcements. Does anyone have any announcements that they, or any other user groups or anything notable that they would like to share with the group? Could be technology news or any positions that you have open that you would like to fill. I've heard nobody's looking for work these days, and the good news is nobody's hiring, so there's just nothing out there, right? So
we're actually looking for somebody, Craig, right?
We're looking for a marketing assistant. Could be part-time, could be full-time.
So if you know somebody that you want to see help do this type of stuff, tell them to send their resume to recruiting@mirazon.com.
Yeah, for sure. And we, from time to time, have different positions available. So that if you go to mirazon.com, you can find those positions as well and read more about them. Let's see. Anyone else? Feel free to type in the chat or just unmute yourself and chime in.
You guys were much more exciting on Halloween. I think it was the candy.
Yeah, the turkey comes afterwards. So LouMug, we meet for you new folks. We meet traditionally on the last Friday of the month, but for November and December for the holidays, we move it up a week. So that's why we're meeting today on the 19th, and the same is true for next month. We'll be meeting a week early. So Today, Tony Morrow with Bellarmine is going to be presenting on Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune. So Tony has presented to our group before. He's a very interesting presenter. Like I said, he's really good at handling questions on the fly and not afraid to do a live demo either, which is really tough. So, and usually pulls them off. How many people would rather see a live demo fail than to see a static picture in a PowerPoint of how it's supposed to work? Well, let me rephrase that. A live demo with the chance to fail. No one wants to see it fail, but yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. So as I mentioned, we meet every month, and the challenge, as you might imagine, is finding topics that you guys want to hear about. And so feel free to let us know what presentations you'd like to see, any technologies, any products. Doesn't have to be Microsoft. It can be really anything IT related. And if you have ideas or leads for presenters, or if you would like to present yourself, then feel free to send an email to Leah, leah.weissman@mirazon.com. You can also submit a form at the bottom of the LouMug.org website, and that will send it to us.
So, I got one.
How long? Awesome. We have a question. Someone has their hand up anyway.
I think it was vestigial from.
Yeah. It's like a high five.
High five. Putting them down.
Awesome. All right. And as we said, our awesome sponsors support us, and we try to, when we used to meet in person, provide a great lunch for everyone to share and refreshments. And so since we've not been doing that, we also have drawings, but we will have a drawing today for a Nanoleaf Rhythm Edition Smarter Starter Kit. I don't know if that's a typo or a.
I copied it from Amazon.
Exactly. Okay, cool. And again, thanks to our premium or platinum sponsors, Fortinet and Veeam and Virtual Telecom and Dell EMC. And so we have some other sponsors as well, CommScope Ruckus, and some other sponsors who have supported us through the years with providing either a venue or maybe some giveaways and things like that. So if you or your organization have a space that you would like for us to consider holding a meeting, we would love to do that. Hopefully as this, as COVID wraps up, if it ever does, we would love to get back to in-person meetings. And one of the things we've done at LouMug is we kind of have a home at the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, which is in the east end of Louisville and Linden. But we have had meetings at the American Printing House for the Blind, which is a little closer to downtown, and other areas as well. So it's great because it gives folks who maybe work in a different end of town to get there for our lunch meeting. So typically we meet from starting at 11:30, and the presentation usually starts about 11:45, and we'll go on till 1:15, something like that. So as I mentioned, next month's meeting, because of the Christmas holidays, will be December 17th. So that's a week early. And next we are going to be covering New Year, new OSs. So we're going to be looking at Windows 11 and Windows Server 2022. And we decided to make it well, not quite perfect, because we did have one in-person meeting. We had a BrewMug social back in the summer.
We had two in-person meetings.
Oh, that's right. We did have one hybrid meeting. You're right. I remember that now. But next month will be a Teams remote-only meeting. And so you can hopefully stay healthy through the holidays, but that doesn't really help Leah, does it? Okay. Any other Questions or comments? I'll stop sharing and let Tony take over. Tony, are you ready to take the helm?
I am. Camera up. Got a screen share going.
It's quite a studio you have there. That's not a background, is it?
No, it's actually this is my basement. Game consoles are over there. So,
Awesome. Look like a radio station.
all right, let's get the presentation started. Let's get screen share going. And get right into it. So thanks, Leah. Thanks, Craig. And I'm just going to go straight into this presentation because, as usual, I've got a ton of things to cover and not enough time to cover all of it. Topics to cover today. What is Microsoft Endpoint Manager? And more specifically, what's Intune? And some of the other features around Intune, which were kind of under Intune, but not now, but they're all under Endpoint Manager. Things you should think about when you're working with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, stuff that they don't put in the docs, but are things that you're going to have to think about if you're getting into Intune for the first time or you're trying to figure out how to use it. I'm going to go over briefly how Bellarmine uses Endpoint Manager in our environment because it's kind of changed over the past like 6 months or so. And then, like Craig was saying, we'll have a demo. We'll have a couple of demos at the end, and they should go okay this time because I'm not going to be trying to get results back. Who am I? As Craig and Leah said, I'm Tony Morrow. I'm Principal Solutions Architect at Bellarmine University. I've been at Bellarmine for 12 years. 10 of that's been in the infrastructure team, and I kind of do a lot of things. Networking, wireless, servers, endpoint management, AD, Azure management, Office 365, VoIP. I touch a lot of things. If you heard me talk, my topics can be quite broad. I always like to put this in my presentation. I'm not a Microsoft MVP or partner. I don't get any special access to Microsoft. I don't have any contacts at Microsoft. I work for Bellarmine University, and we are a consumer and user of Microsoft. All the technologies demoed here are either using free licenses, trial licenses, or well, probably not today, but paid licenses. Bellarmine, we write Microsoft a giant check to use all of their stuff. All the opinions in this of this presentation are my own. Nobody's paying me for this presentation, and nobody's reviewed it beforehand. So if anything in here is wrong, it's because I got it wrong. I want to go off on a tangent real quick. If you're wanting to play with Microsoft 365, go get a development environment. Here's the URL for it. It'll be in the slide deck. You can click on it later, but this will take you straight to the page to go set up a development environment with Microsoft 365. It has everything in it. It has Azure Active Directory. It has user licenses. It comes with 25 E5 user licenses to play with. And if you know anything about Microsoft's licensing, it's what the features you get is based on the user licenses. So with E5, you pretty much have all the features of Office 365 or Microsoft 365. It's you may not have like advanced threat protection. I'm not sure on that one. And you don't have Azure compute credits. So while you do have an Azure environment inside the development environment, you still have to like connect a credit card or fund it if you're wanting to play with like Azure compute resources or log analytics or any of those other features. You still have to pay for that stuff. But the environment's free, so go have fun in it. You can, destroy your SharePoint setup. You can play with Teams. You can play with the Graph API and not worry about leaking sensitive company information with it. That's my tangent on this. So if you don't have one, get one. It's free. Okay. Microsoft Endpoint Manager. What is it? It's kind of changed over the years, and it's turned into this combination of different products from Microsoft. It's, it kind of started out with Intune and Autopilot and and then they decided to roll Configuration Manager into it, and it's basically your device management platform from Microsoft. There's many competitors out there, and Microsoft, this is what they've carved into for their own little thing. Like I said, it does desktop analytics, does device auto configuration, and it includes a number of technologies that I've mentioned before. Azure Active Directory, which, let's be honest, if you just kind of glance at anything Office 365, you get an Azure AD environment with it, so that's not that big of a deal. Configuration Manager, like I said, that gets rolled in. That's under the Endpoint Manager product stack now called Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, not to be confused with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Intune, which is their cloud product, and then Autopilot, Autoenrollment. We'll talk about those two later on. And a lot of other stuff as well that it's just the list is there's like 20 items in it. Quick note on the licensing for Endpoint Manager. If you've got any Microsoft 365 E3 or E5 licenses, you have Endpoint Manager completely unlocked to you. Now you may have to have enough user licenses to properly cover your users. But that's the weird thing with Microsoft is if you have one of those licenses, the entire stack is unlocked. Whether or not everybody in your organization can be using that product depends on the licensing. If you're not a Microsoft 365 license, if you don't have those licenses, and you just got Office 365, you can add on the Enterprise and Mobility and Security Suite to those users. But at that point, you may want to just start looking at just going over to Microsoft 365. If you go all the way to the end of this table, there is frontline worker licenses that includes Intune, which is cheaper. But Microsoft likes to talk about frontline workers, but I've not seen a use case of it, at least in our organization, for frontline workers yet. So I don't know if you are using them. If you are, talk about it in the chat. I'll be watching it over here, and we can bring it up. So first thing I want to talk about, Configuration Manager. It's Microsoft's desktop on-prem management platform. It's been around since like 1994. And if you think about that, that was the Windows 3.1 days. I can't believe we've been managing Windows. But it does tons of stuff. It does OS imaging. It does app deployments. It does configuration compliance, Windows updates. Oh, wait, this is the wrong presentation. We're not talking about Configuration Manager. We're talking about Intune, right? So, what's Intune? If we were going off the name of this talk, the other white meat, let's just call it the buffet. So it's Microsoft's cloud-based device and application management platform. I think I just took that straight from their website. And it does a ton of things in here, and a lot of them I'm not going to be able to get to today, but it supports a lot of different OS platforms, even more, and actually does it easier than Configuration Manager, but obviously it does Windows because, well, it's Microsoft. It does macOS. It does iOS, iPadOS. It even does Android, which that's kind of the stepchild of the four, because that's not as friendly, and I think it's just because of how Android is architected. And at Ignite this year, just this month, Microsoft announced that they're bringing support for Endpoint Manager and Intune to Linux desktop. What does that mean? I have no idea. I didn't check any of the presentations. I just saw that in the announcements. But Endpoint Manager is coming to the Linux desktop, people. Let's get excited. No, nothing? Okay. Things you do with Intune. The obvious things that we've been doing for years with device management. We're pushing software updates to devices, and again, that can be any of those devices. Pushing settings to devices. That's probably where you will be spending a majority of your time in Intune, is playing with policy, with profiles and configuration stuff. There we go. There's a shout out there. That's exciting. Good. Compliance policies, making sure your devices are, well, just like I said, compliant with restrictions that you've set. So that can be stuff like, does a device have, does a mobile device have a passcode? Is it long enough? How old is it? Are they allowed to access stuff like the camera or record things? All that can be done via compliance policies. Some things can be remediated with compliance policies. Other things cannot. At which point you'll use configuration profile. Manage Windows updates on Windows and iOS. On the Windows side, you're looking at when feature updates and quality updates can be applied to Windows devices. Or like the upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you can control when that gets released to users. A lot of that goes back to that whole Windows updates for business, which is kind of ambiguous still. I feel iOS, iPad OS, where you're looking at when major firmware releases can be updated on devices. And what management platform wouldn't be complete without the ability to just run scripts? Because just sometimes you have to do it the hard way. Keith Thomas asks, is there any problems with work from home or mobile? We'll talk about that a little bit, I hope. And the answer to that is no, because if you're, especially for Windows devices, I'll talk about that in a moment about the differences, like especially what we're doing at Bellarmine, and we'll see how that applies to your question. If you have more questions on that, just ask as we go. Specific components of Intune. We've got, like I said, application deployment, and every OS right now supports application deployment. On the Windows side, you can do store apps kind of easily. You just have to go to the website for the Microsoft Store and copy the URL, then go back to Intune and paste it in, and then you have to decide. You have to go steal the icon for it if you want icons stuff. MSIs are by far the easiest method, or AppX bundles, because those are called line of business apps, and you just upload the MSI and you click through a few buttons and you're done. EXEs are a little bit more complicated because you have to package them first into an Intune WIN file. But once you do that, if you've ever done application script deployments on Configuration Manager, it's the same process where you tell it what the install command is, what the uninstall command is, what the detection rule is, are there any dependencies, what platform does it support, things like that. If you've done that Configuration Manager, it's pretty much exactly the same in Intune, and I'll go through a demo of that. macOS, it's similar to EXEs on Windows, where you have to package it first, where you upload it to Intune, and there's a bit of a caveat on all of that, and I'll talk about that here. I got a slide here in a moment. iPad iOS, by far the easiest method if you're just pulling from the store app. If you're a company that you have, like if you're building your own applications and you're signing them and you're deploying them manually, you can do that with Intune. But if you're just needing to tell a device, like, go get the Outlook app, it's super easy. They actually put the search for the iOS App Store in Intune. And so you just search, you click, and like 10 clicks later, you're done. Finally, Android deployments is pretty much the same as Windows Store apps. You have to go to the Play Store, find the URL, and then copy it back and steal the icon, and then just a few more clicks and you're done. Stephen asks, is Intune a replacement for other MDM services such as Jamf Now, or I don't even know how to pronounce that, Mozile? Yes, it can be. Now, I'll talk a little bit about if you're using it for like settings and app deployments. Yes, Intune can be a replacement for that. Now, it's not going to be as probably, if you're doing a whole lot of iOS management, it's probably not going to be as convenient or easy to use as those products like Jamf. Like, I know Jamf is very Apple focused. It won't be as seamless as that, but you can do it. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit with how we're doing it at Bellarmine. Intune configuration profiles. Like I said, this is where you'll do a lot of your work. It's because it's the equivalent to your Active Directory group policy objects. If you've done any package files with the Windows Imaging Configuration Designer, Wicked, whatever that application is, get it from the Windows Store now. You don't have to go install ADK anymore. If you've ever built profiles using that tool, the Intune is the equivalent for that. If you've ever played with mobile config files with iOS or macOS, configuration profiles in Intune is the replacement for those. And pretty much any application or device settings you're going to push to a user or a device, you will be doing it with configuration profiles. Now, configuration profile may not have everything you need. At that point, that's where you need to fall back to maybe using a script on Windows or macOS. But I would try to avoid that if you can. Getting specifically into configuration profiles per platform, I'll start with macOS and iOS because it's kind of the easiest to understand, especially if you've been doing iOS management for a long time. And you can do, it has a bunch of built-in templates. So you can deploy certificates to your devices. You can deploy VPN profiles, Wi-Fi profiles. You can do those device restrictions on, yes, you need a passcode. Yes, it needs to be rotated every 90 days and and a few other settings. But I will tell you, it is a bit limited. And like I said, it's probably not as seamless or as easy to use as those other MDM platforms that have been around just as long as Intune. But there is a workaround for that. If you've been doing Mac deployment, you've probably heard of this application called Profile Creator. It is an open source tool. Go to GitHub. You can download it. It's working. They updated it this year to work with Big Sur. And it basically can build you mobile config files in the exact same manner that Apple Profile Manager would do. And it actually goes beyond that, because if there's applications that support MDM profiles, typically those aren't in Profile Manager, but you can, like Chrome, for example, has MDM profiles available for it. The community has added those into this application. So you can go build config files for Chrome, for macOS or iOS, and a ton of other applications, and then just export the mobile config files. Once you have a mobile config file, you can take those over to Intune and import them as a custom profile for iOS or macOS. Like I said, it's probably not as easy as those other platforms, but it is possible. You can, anything you want to do with manage macOS or iOS, you can probably do it with Intune. You just may have to use a third-party tool, Profile Creator, which, by the way, is macOS only, and build the configs and then import them. Windows, kind of the same, pretty much the same deal, but obviously since Windows is Microsoft's platform, you have some more built-in templates available. You'll get the Wi-Fi, the certificates, the VPN, the device restrictions, but you can do other things like doing kiosk mode, making a computer that auto logs in and goes to a website that's full page or a dedicated application. And we have like three use cases for that at Bellarmine, where we have like an interactive digital signage where people can actually go up and actually click on stuff and see things. We're actually using a kiosk mode configuration profile for that, and change the edition of Windows 10 that's being managed. So if you're buying computers with Windows Pro, if you're an M365 customer, you're already should be getting Windows Enterprise Edition, and upgrade that. So then you can change the background on the login screen. And this is what I think is probably, if you've not played with Intune in a while, or at least in the past year, this is something you really need to check out. So they've added a new feature in configuration profiles. There's templates, and now there's this new thing called Settings Catalog. It's in preview. But on the Windows side, that Settings Catalog includes every built-in administrative template of the Windows operating system. I don't know if it's Windows 11. I know it's Windows 10. I don't know if it's got Windows 11 in there yet. And so if you're like us and you've been looking at Intune, and you're like, oh, man, I really need to replicate some of the GPO policies I've got on campus in my AD environment onto these Intune managed only computers, but they don't have all the administrative templates in Intune. What do I do? Well, as of 21H1 that came out back in March of this year, that version of Windows 10 and newer supports all of these Settings Catalog administrative templates. And like I said, it has, I say all, it's probably almost all, but like all the stuff that you've used over the years, so the past 20 plus years of managing Windows with GPOs, you can now do it from Intune. I'll let that sink in for a little bit. And then finally, if you really want to do it the hard way, there are custom profiles available to be built for Windows. It's not easy, but I do have, I'm going to show like the most basic demo I can. And even then, you're probably going to get lost in the process. It's something that I have trouble doing, but I've done it, especially like with Chrome and Firefox. I've built configuration profiles so that we set like the home page, and do we use the built-in PDF viewer or make people download files, or do we show the home button? Stuff like that. You can do this via custom profiles. All right. This isn't specifically Intune, although back before Endpoint Manager became a thing, it was under the Intune interface. Now it's just under Endpoint Manager's interface, which is practically the same thing. And that is Autopilot. If you watch, Craig says GPO for non-domain joined devices. Yes, pretty much. So if you've watched or read Microsoft's marketing or their sales pitch for Autopilot, they tell you about this great story of you've got remote workers. Well, we do now, because I know before 2020, some of us probably didn't have any remote workers. You've got somebody who works for your company, and they live remote, and they're never coming to the office, and you need to get them a computer. Well, what you can do is go to a given manufacturer, you buy a computer, you have it, you tell the manufacturer enroll that into Autopilot for your tenant, and you give them the shipping address of your new user, and they ship that computer straight to that user. User takes it out of the box, they open it up, they connect it to the internet during the out-of-box experience, and it's like, oh, this is a Bellarmine computer, and goes through the login experience. Because once it's enrolled into Autopilot, it gets enrolled into Intune, and based on group membership stuff and things, you can have that computer automatically download, device restrictions, configuration profiles, and applications. Now, I don't know about you, but personally, I'm kind of a control freak, probably why I work in IT. And you're probably a bit of a control freak too, especially when it comes to computer deployments. So the idea of shipping a computer straight from a manufacturer to a user probably your thing is probably not ideal. There is a workaround for that. There is this functionality of Autopilot called white glove experience, where you ship the computers to you, the IT person. You open it up into the white glove experience. You make sure that it gets Windows updates and the software and stuff, and then you kind of reseal it and then you ship it off to somebody. And again, that's a good use case for Autopilot. And you should really think about, if you're going to be managing computers that are only connected to Azure, really think about Autopilot. But here's the biggest thing I think that's important about Autopilot is device ownership throughout its life cycle. So if you or I were to go buy a computer from like Lenovo or HP, buy a bunch of computers, we bring them to the office, and we're like, all right, we're going to connect them we're going to manage them with Intune. They're going to be connected to Azure only. That's great. So you set them up. You either use a flash drive or something to connect it together. If that computer gets stolen and the thief resets the device, all of that MDM configuration is gone. Greg's like, I prefer Control Enthusiast. Okay, Control Enthusiast it is then. So, like I was saying, if that computer gets reset, all of the MDM stuff is gone, and it's basically like a personal computer you bought off the shelf at Best Buy. But if that computer is enrolled into Autopilot, then whenever it gets reset, it's going to, as soon as it connects to the internet for the out-of-box experience, it's going to be like, oh, I belong to that organization. And depending on your Autopilot setup, you could say this computer can only be logged in with one of our accounts. So you've made that computer useless for the thief or whoever they sell it off to. Obviously, they could put Linux on it and get around that issue, but that's the real use case. That's the biggest use case I see for Autopilot, is making sure you own a device from the time you buy it to the time you retire it. Also, make sure you remove devices from Autopilot when you retire them. That makes it for the next person. Steve says Apple's been doing this for years with MDM services. Yep, it's all owned organization. Yep, I actually have a slide about that coming up next, Steve. I'll talk about that. Can you track it? Go find it. Yes. If you go into Azure Active Directory, you can't. There is a button that says it can help you track down a given device. I've not had much luck with it yet. But you should be able to find out like the last IP address, which will get you within a given region. I don't know if it's going to get you down. It's not going to get you down to the street and stuff like Find My iPhone does. But they say you can find a device. I've not had any luck with it yet when I've tested it. So your mileage may vary. Autopilot support by manufacturer varies. Dell has, I think, the easiest experience because when you go to order a bunch of computers, there's literally, as you're scrolling through the hardware configuration, there's a section for Autopilot. You just type in the tenant ID for your organization, and I think there's a separate ID for your Intune environment. And I believe, because I've not actually done this with production yet, it's supposed to, Dell will automatically add those devices into your auto-enrollment list of devices. And from there, you have your profiles, and then you can go add those devices to groups in Azure Active Directory. And basically, as soon as you open that computer up, it's pulling a configuration and doing its thing. HP, I think, from what I've read, you have to get your order number, email it to an address at hp.com, and they send you back the Excel spreadsheet you upload for Autopilot. And Lenovo, I haven't been able to figure it out yet. But we don't buy computers from Lenovo anymore. We're kind of just a Dell shop these days. So, like I said, mileage may vary. I don't know about any of the other manufacturers out there, and you'll have to just probably ask your partner on that. This goes back to what Steve was talking about. macOS and iOS has a feature called Autoenrollment. So if you are buying computers from or iPhone or iOS devices from Apple, and you're doing it under an organization account, there's a functionality at Apple called Apple Business Manager, and all of your orders can be seen through Apple Business Manager. All of the devices under those orders can be seen under Business Manager. And then what you do is you take those devices and you assign them to different MDM platforms. It can be Intune, it can be Jamf, it could be Apple Profile Manager. And you basically say, yeah, when that computer or when that iPhone boots up and it connects to the internet for the first time, it's going to talk with Apple. Apple's going to say, go talk to that MDM platform, and then that computer will go to that platform and do its thing. If you're a school, Apple has the exact same thing, but it's called Apple School Manager, and it's basically a copy paste. It's a Find Business replaced with School Manager. That's it. It's pretty much exactly the same. It's for education instead of businesses, and so they named it differently. macOS management in Intune, I will say it's challenging. And I put in here, bless your heart, because man, it can, some weird things can happen. I'm not going to say that these don't happen on other platforms, other OSs, other MDM platforms, but this has just been our use case, just our personal cases at Bellarmine of things that have happened. Yeah, Leah, I'm the most cutting Southern phrase. Bless your heart. So I feel Intune can be a great replacement for Apple Profile Manager. If you're using a Mac server or a Mac computer and you're running Apple Profile Manager, it's probably time to start moving off that, because let's admit it, that's one of the two things that are left in the server app on macOS. That and the Xsan functionality. There's not really a whole lot left in that application. And eventually, I kind of feel like they're just going to finally just kick it away. So, but app deployments with macOS from Intune. Oh boy. The biggest issue is if you're going to deploy an application from Intune, and this is Apple's requirement, not Microsoft's requirement, so Microsoft has to comply with this for it to even work. An application, the actual app file must be signed, which Apple's been requiring that for years. But now the installer also has to be signed. The installer has to be notarized by Apple saying, yeah, we verified it, it's good, that the signing was good. And that notarization has to be stapled to the installer for all of it to work. Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't to me, but luckily there's this guy named Tom Bridge, and he did some great post and a video about it. And I suggest go checking that out. So if you're trying to deploy macOS software from Intune, know that the installer has to be signed, notarized, and the notarization has to be stapled. Now, if you're downloading an application installer like a PKG file, and it's already signed by the creator, but they didn't notarize it or they didn't staple the notarization to it, you can do that yourself. There's a command for in Xcode to do that. But if you're trying to deploy an open source application that's not signed, it's not going to work with Intune. Case in point, we deploy one application from Intune to our Macs, and that's Monkey. Or if you've done Mac management, you've probably heard of Monkey. It's a great tool. It's a great open source tool for deploying software and settings to Macs. So we have our Macs enrolled into Intune, and we push configuration profiles to them. We push Monkey to them, and then we deploy all of our other all of our software is deployed via Monkey. It's kind of been our workaround because we deploy Creative Cloud to our public computers, and the Creative Cloud installer is not signed from Adobe because you can configure what applications you want to download for it. Plus, it's like 60 gigs. That's a big package. You can upload it to Intune and deploy it if you sign the installer. Yep, Steve loves Monkey. Great price and fairly comparable to Jamf, Meraki MDM. So, other challenges we've had with macOS. I don't know why. We've had issues where like configuration profiles just suddenly disappeared off the Mac. No idea why. My coworker James does most of the Mac management, and he was telling me the story of like he got a new Mac, set it up, got it all working, got it added to our domain for Active Directory so the user could log into it and had it checked so they could log into it when they're not on the campus. Gave it to the user. User went home, tried to log in, couldn't log in. He brought it back the next day. James looked at it, and the Active Directory join profile and several other profiles were just gone from the system. No idea why, but they were gone. On the flip side of that, we've had profiles not be removed when we wanted them to. So I think James was moving computers from one group to another in Intune, and in theory, the Mac would check in with Intune. It's like, oh, that's not deployed to me anymore. I need to remove it. And it never got removed. And as far as we know, there's no way to manually remove a profile from macOS if it's deployed from an MDM platform. Kind of a good security measure. But then there's we had literally no way of removing that profile, and so we just ended up having to wipe some of the Macs and start over. Well, I say we, I mean James. And finally, unlike Windows, there's no cloud authentication mechanism built into macOS. There's kind of one on iPadOS. Can do it with, but on macOS, there's no way to have a computer that's joined to Azure Active Directory, and no matter where that Mac is, if it's got an internet connection, allow a user to log in with a tenant or work account at username and password. Now, there are products out there that can help you do this. Jamf Connect is one of those. We've actually thought about it. Like, no, if we had our Macs with Jamf, then like a user could take their computer, as long as they had internet, and they could log into it using SSO from Azure. And for the price, because we don't have that many Macs, relatively speaking, it's kind of worth it for us. So we've kind of thought about it. I went back and forth with James about it, and we're not ready to sign the check yet, but we're kind of it's something we'd kind of like to play with. Things you should think about when you're setting up and using Intune. The first thing I want to say is organization, and specifically, how are you going to organize your devices and profiles and stuff? Because for some reason, in the cloud, directory structures don't exist. I say that as a joke, but if you go into Azure Active Directory, the concept of an organizational unit doesn't exist in Azure AD. It doesn't exist in Endpoint Manager either. So you don't have so how are you going to group stuff together? I put this in here. It's a very I'm assuming it's a very hard computer science problem. If anybody knows that reference, please put it in the chat. But how are you going to group your devices and users together for Intune? Spoiler alert, you're going to have to use groups. But then also, how are you going to organize and name the dozens, if not eventually hundreds, hopefully just like 100, configuration profiles and applications you're deploying across potentially up to 4 different platforms? There's like one pane of glass that you can look at that has all of your profiles, and another one that has all your applications. Now you can break that down on a per OS basis, but still, like, eventually you're going to have a giant list of applications if you're using Intune as much as your configuration manager. So those are things you really need to start thinking about when you're starting to look at Intune and again, this is stuff that they don't talk about in like all the docs at Microsoft, or whenever you're going through like the blog, like people who've written blog posts about Intune. I don't think anybody really talks about it, but it's something you really got to start thinking about ahead of time in architecting. What devices are you going to manage? Obviously, you're going to want to manage, basically speaking on the Windows side, your Azure AD joint computers, because they don't have any other management platform available. It's Intune or nothing. But for your Azure, not your Azure, but your AD joint computer, are you going to manage those from Intune? You can do it. But if you're using configuration manager and GPOs, then you got to figure out, all right, these settings got applied via GPOs. This one got applied via compliance policy and configuration manager. This one got applied via Intune configuration profiles or compliance policies. It can be a big confusing mess, especially when you're trying to figure out when things are not working right. So you got to think about, are you going to manage all of those computers you've already been managing for 20 years? What about mobile devices? Are you going to manage the iPhone that you give to your CEO? Are you going to manage the iPhone that you give to everybody in your organization? How are you going to manage that? What settings are you going to set? What freedoms are you going to have? What restrictions are you going to have on them for your users? And probably the biggest question you've got to answer when you're setting up Intune and Endpoint Manager, are you going to manage employee personal devices? Because you can do that. You can have, like, if you were to open up Office on a personal computer and you log into it with your work account, there's that pop-up that says, hey, do you want me to use this sign-in across all your apps? That's called Azure AD registration. And if a device is registered to Azure Active Directory, it can be managed from Intune. Now, it's not joined to Azure Active Directory, so it doesn't have the same control plane, but you can still deploy software to it. You can still put access restrictions, policy restrictions to those devices. So you need to be careful. Like, if somebody has registered their personal computer because they opened up Office on their personal computer with their work account, you're going to have to start dealing with those questions as well. And the same thing for mobile devices. If somebody's using Outlook on their phone, are you going to manage whether or not they can take a screenshot of it, whether or not they can they need a passcode, all of that information, all those settings, you need to decide on what's going to be done on a personal device. And at Bellarmine, we've had cases like somebody's like, especially during the pandemic, they're like, why are you managing my device? I didn't tell you I didn't allow you to manage my device. I'm like, whoa. We're not pushing any policies to your computer. We're not doing anything with your computer. It's just that because you opened an app and you used your work account and you had that pop-up that says, hey, do you want to do this? And you click yes. It got Azure Active Directory registered. We've got thousands of AD registered computers. We're not pushing any policies to those. We're just pretending they don't exist. Eric puts in a meme. There are 2 hard things in computer science: hash invalidation and naming things. Close. The joke came from back when the Surface Pro 4 came out, and they were having all kinds of power management issues, like with sleep and stuff. And so it got to the holiday period, and they're like, we're not going to be able to fix this right now. It's a really hard, and somebody literally said from Microsoft, It's a hard computer science problem. And the internet erupted in lulls and anger, because that's what the internet does. So, Bellarmine, Endpoint Manager at Bellarmine, what are we doing? The answer is pretty much the same thing we've been doing for 20 years, kind of. So we have like over 1,000, almost 1,500 computers on our campus, and we're managing those the traditional way. We're using Active Directory, we're using group policy objects, and we're using Configuration Manager. You know, the three pillars that everybody's been using since 2000. What we started doing this year was really diving into how to use Intune. And the reason for this is, well, one, we had a global pandemic and a lot of people are working remote. And the biggest challenge we run into is password changes. We can allow people to go to Office 365, or they can go to our Azure AD or our ADFS server and change their password. But if they're logged into a AD joined computer and that AD joined computer is not on our campus, that computer never gets the password update. So now the user is logging into the computer with their old password, and they're logging into Office with their new password. I think it's a really hard mismatch, and it's really frustrating. But if you have a computer that's just joined to Azure Active Directory, they can change the password on the computer. They can change the password in Office 365 on a web page, and when they do that, change is almost instantly synced back to the computer. So the next time they log into that system, got the new password. The other big thing is our Student Government Association asked for 30 laptops for students to check out and take off campus, like some of our student athletes who don't have a personal laptop, or a student who's going to be leaving campus for the weekend and they need a computer because they don't have one. Our Student Government Association, they wanted laptops for students to be able to check out. And that is, for us, the perfect use case for using Azure AD join systems and Intune. We're not doing any of the whole co-management stuff with Intune and SCCM. Like I said earlier, that feels really, really confusing, especially when you're trying to debug on what settings are being pushed from where. So we, and when I say we, I mean I, just made a stance of, if a computer is joined to AD, it's managed via GPO and SCCM. If it's joined to Azure, it's managed with Intune. And for us, we can do that because we're only have like 50 computers out in the wild that are joined to Azure. In fact, my work computer at my office desk is only joined to Azure AD, and I can do 98% of my admin job from that system. I need to use 80 users of computers. I can do it. I need to access a network share. I can do it. I need to access a printer. I can do it. I need to use the DHCP MMC console. I can do it. I need to use Azure AD tools through PowerShell. I can do it with an asterisk. It's possible to do it. So if I can do my job as an administrator from an AD joint computer, then pretty much probably anybody else at Bellarmine could probably do their job from an AD joint. And we've actually started thinking about, if we are deploying laptops to employees, maybe we just join the AD, because if that computer goes off campus and they need to change the password that week, they can do it and everything's going to work. Let's see, Garrett asks, any way you found to restrict AAD registering a personal device when you have Intune? Mostly because of that use case mentioned with Office installations unintentionally. Doesn't seem like you can only keep it from enrolling in Intune. Restrict from registering for Azure Active Directory, I don't remember off the top of my head. But we are definitely doing what you're talking about. Is it's registered to AD to Azure, but it is not enrolled into Intune. And at that point, it seems like that's safe. Because of that, the device isn't showing up in Intune and getting policies. So if you're worried about that, definitely look at the instructions about restricting who can join a computer to Azure Active Directory and what devices can be registered in. That's actually two separate settings. One's in Azure, one's in Intune. Check those two out. And then finally, on the Mac side, honestly, for the size of our campus, we don't have a lot of Macs, especially compared to other schools we've talked to. We've got about 80-ish enrolled into Intune. Most of those are our classroom computers, usually like for art and music and stuff. And like I said before, we're pushing policies or configuration profiles to them from Intune, and we're deploying our software from Monkey, just because it's as redundant as that is, and as complicated as it is, it's still easier than dealing with applications in it. At least right now. We'll see how that changes in. Topics not covered today. There's a lot. We could talk about device protection policies, how compliance policies work, how conditional access policies can be used with compliance policies, how app protection policies can be used. If you're wanting to make sure that an employee who's using the Word app on their iPhone has to meet certain criteria, but you don't want that device enrolled into Intune, check out app protection policies. It might be the solution for you. It's not user friendliest method, I feel, but you can have app protection policy that says, yeah, to use Word or Outlook or whatever application, the user must like unlock the application, and you can set it so that the user like can't take a screenshot while that application is open. Again, that device is not enrolled in Intune. You're not managing the device. You're managing the application that's on the device. Steve asks, would enrolling an AD joined PC into Intune prevent tombstoning for computers that don't connect to the on-prem DC for months at a time? The answer to that is no. So what you're talking about is, they call it Azure Hybrid Join. And we do that at Bellarmine. As soon as a computer is imaged with Configuration Manager, at the end of the process, it is actually going to Azure at the same time. It's literally a completely automated process in the background, because and then through a whole bunch of stuff that goes through Azure AD Connect and things. It's like, I can't remember everything off the top of my head. It's really complicated. But when the computer is hybrid joined, it does not solve the tombstoning problem. Like, if a computer's hybrid joined and I have that computer off campus and I try to change my password from it, it's not going to work. You're still going to have that issue of, like, I changed it in AD, but the computer's not on AD to get that setting. And when we were looking at Intune and stuff at the start of the pandemic, because almost all of our computers are hybrid joined, because truth be told, if you're hybrid joined, it makes the whole out-of-box experience with Office apps better, because as soon as you launch the Office app, it automatically logs in with the profile you log into the computer, so the user doesn't have to click extra things to use Word. But yeah, it doesn't solve that issue. So you're going to have to think about, the computer is either joined to AD or it's joined to Azure. If it's joined to Azure, then your life outside of your domain is much on a management standpoint. Keith asks, how difficult is it to join a PC already in a work from home environment? There are like 5 different ways to join computers to Azure Active Directory remotely or register them with Intune. You can have somebody install a PPKG file, which you can use. You can use Wicked to build that. It says, hey, join this computer to Azure AD, and from there it can get automatically enrolled into Intune. That's probably going to be your easiest method for already deployed system. But as bad as it sounds, you have to send a piece of an executable, or not. It's really it's a config file to a user, and you're going to tell that user to double click on it. There are other methods of getting devices enrolled, and like I said, there's like 5 different ways. You'll just have to double check the documentation and see which one is going to work for your scenario. And other topics not covered: Defender endpoint protection, because you can configure endpoint protection as much as you want. Other things not covered: role-based access control for Intune management, Windows Update management, PowerShell and the Graph API, you can do almost, actually, I think when you're looking at like the whole interface of Intune or Azure Active Directory, you know, there's that purple banner that says, hey, we got new features. You want to check out the new experience? When you're using the new experience, all of that functionality is coming through the Graph API. So you can actually, if you can think of something that you need to do, sometimes the Graph API can probably do it. You just got to figure out the right syntax and the body and the post and stuff. Let's see. As it says, good luck with that, Keith. I know one of your users. And then Roger says, PowerShell Graph module is a mess, but it can do so much. Yes, I will totally agree with that. The PowerShell module for the Graph API is a complete mess. It's also really confusing when there's a separate module for like Azure Active Directory versus Intune, but there's like 65% overlap in what they do, but the commands aren't exactly the same, and the syntax isn't exactly the same, and the output's not exactly the same. You gotta be careful because you're like, I used this command and it worked. The output, great, but I need to use this other command, and the output and the input and the output is completely different. So yeah, that can get really frustrating. That's all I got for the presentation. Why don't we go into some demos? And these are not going to be super complex. These aren't going to be super complicated demos. It's just here's the basics on getting things set up, and then I'll do the whole complicated custom profile stuff on Windows. So endpoint interface. You're probably familiar. You've probably seen it once or twice before. Again, this is a Microsoft 365 development environment. I went and set it up a few weeks ago. I literally clicked through yes, enter my information. What do you need this for? Demo. And from there, there's a few other buttons to say, hey, populate users, populate email accounts for these users, populate SharePoint for this environment, and it kind of builds it all out of templates. It takes like less than an hour to do. I talked about before, you want to figure out your management stuff, especially groups. And if you created a group in AD, you can do it. Then you know how to do it here. All you do is click new group, choose your type. In this case, stick with security groups because you can't deploy some things to Microsoft 365 groups from Intune. As annoying as it is, can't do it. I will say, if you're needing to do group like nesting of groups within groups, that works in Intune. Like if you've got one group that has like all your computers and you have a subgroup for that, or a group, and you have subgroups like this is Department A, Department B, Department C, and you deploy something to this top group that has all those other groups in it, all of those nested groups and devices and or users will get that profile, get that policy or that application. It does, grouping doesn't work for group nesting, doesn't work for N65 groups. It doesn't work for conditional access rules, but it does work for policy deployments and application deployments in Intune. So thank you, Microsoft, for doing that, because I would be really annoyed if you didn't. When you're doing groups, you can do manual assignments. Again, these are all pre-created users. This isn't a real person. This is just an account that the development environment built for me. And then finally, let's see, name, hi there. Or you can do dynamic membership based on properties of devices or users. Microsoft has some good documentation if you go find it on what properties are available to be used. Like on a user, you could say, if you wanted to dynamically get all the users of a given department, as long as the department attribute of their AD of their user object is populated, it will collect those people together and add them to the group. One thing I do find annoying is if you were to go to devices and you were to pick a device, I don't have many devices in here in my environment, you can't control group management on a device from here like you can in like AD where you do member of. It's not a thing. You have to go from the group. So it's really annoying. Like I need to know what all the groups that this computer is a member of, or this user is a member of. So you have to go to the user. You'll get the list. You're like, okay, I now need to remove or add or remove this user from from these groups and then add them to these groups, and you have to go do it from the group content. That's really annoying in here, but it's something you have to live with. Hopefully not forever, but it's probably going to be for the near. I gotta look at everything I've been going. Let's see. Building an application. So I talked about it during the presentation. Application building, like I said, iOS, iPadOS, by far the easiest method to do. Again, if you're a company and you're building your own apps internally and you're pushing them out to users manually or devices via an MDM profile or MDM platform or something, you can still do that in here. It goes under the line of business app. But in this case, I'm just going to use the iOS store. Next, like the app store, or the app from the store. Let's find Word. Click next. And you know what? That probably works better than the built-in search on iOS, where you're getting the targeted ads and the upvoted applications. Like, hey, I paid money to get my app at the top of the list. This search, I think, works better. It automatically populates the name, the description, the publisher, the minimum OS version, application compatibility, and even the logo. And then assignment. And then the only thing left you have to do is assign it to a group. You don't assign it to a user. You don't assign it to a device. You assign it to a group. And in the case for iOS apps, you have to just assign it to a group of users. Device context really isn't a thing for the iOS mobile platform. So everything you're going to be deploying will be to a group of users. Skip that for now. Because I don't really have a demo. I don't really have time or a demo or a device to demo all of this. That was iOS. Let's go to Windows. And in the case of Windows, there's a couple of different options in here. Like you can deploy Office apps, the Office apps right here. You can deploy Edge. And this is the new Edge, Chromium based Edge, Credge, Edgeum, whichever way you want to call it. That's the new one. Or you can do the Microsoft Store app, or you can do MSIs or just straight EXEs. What about legacy database client programs? Sean asks. And then Garrett asks, how do you approach remote assistance in Intune TeamViewer? So to answer Sean, if it's an EXE installer, I will show that here in a moment. Let's go from the easiest to the hardest, and I'll show different ways you can do. And I'll answer Garrett's here in just a moment once I get through with this demo. So the Microsoft Store app, again, you click next, and instead of getting a nice search bar, why don't we have search here? You have to go to the store through the web browser because the share link in the Microsoft Store app isn't good enough. And let's say I want to deploy Netflix. I'd be deploying Netflix, but I would deploy Netflix. I'm going to copy the URL. Say Netflix, because I type it all in manually. You have to add a description. This, I don't care. Okay, publisher. Clicks the URL. You can assign categories if you want. You can do other information if you want. Again, you have to go steal the logo from somewhere and add it manually, which I also find super annoying. And then finally, again, you can assign it to groups. If you hover over this, I think you can deploy. Well, this is only for available. So if it's available for enrolled devices, it has to be deployed to a group of users. You can see that last sentence of this hover over. Available assignments are only valid for user groups, not device groups. It's just a limitation of how mobile device management works, especially whenever everybody tried to copy Apple. So that's the easiest method if you're deploying a store app. I will say you're probably going to deploy at least one store app to all of your Windows joined devices, and that is Company Portal. What's Company Portal? It's basically the front end for users so they can see what applications are available to them on a given device. If you've used Configuration Manager and Software Center, it's the Intune equivalent to Software Center. Again, the catch is it has to be applications deployed to users for them to see those applications in that application in company portal. If you're deploying applications to devices, a user is not going to see that application, unlike which you can totally do in Software Center all the time. But you can't do you have to use user. You have to be user centric, and that's a challenge we've been having at Bellarmine for 20 plus years. We've been very device centric on policies and settings and compliance and stuff. And going to Intune, first thing you can do configuration profiles in applications on a per device basis. But Microsoft and everybody really wants you to be user focused, and that's a challenge for us. We're trying to overcome it and rethink how we do stuff around that to all those issues. All right, line of business apps. Like I said, this is if you've got an MSI installer, an Apex bundle. If you've built apps with Visual Studio and you're building bundles, I don't know of anybody who is unless they're submitting it to the App Store. So let's just stick with MSIs because it's easier to think about. It's really easy. You just go in here and you select, go up a level. Oh, Chrome. Yep, Chrome. Here's my installer for Chrome. Enterprise 64-bit MSI. And at least it populates some of the stuff for you already. It doesn't, none of these populate publisher for some reason. Why? And the app context, it's locked based on the installer configuration. So and this can be wrong sometimes. You can have an application that you're trying to deploy to a device, but it's set for user context. And that might be a problem for you. There is a workaround for it, and I'll talk about it in a moment. You can have it specify whether or not you care about the version number of the application installed. Again, category, is it featured in the portal, and finally a logo, which you'll have to manually add the logo. Now, when you're doing MSIs, you can do required assignments to device groups, or you can do available assignments to users. So that's the difference you want to think about is required, or you can do required to users as well. So no matter what device a user logs into, if that application is required for them, it will automatically install on that Intune managed device. Case in point, I accidentally deployed our fax server client to my coworker Brian's personal computer because he was actually registered because of we're using advanced threat protection. And he's like, why do I have our fax client on my personal Surface Book? I'm like, oops, let me fix that because I'd accidentally set a user group as required. And even though that computer wasn't going to AD, it was registered to AD and managed with Intune because of ATP. It installed. So again, got to be a little careful there when you're talking about what's registered, what's enrolled into Intune. And that's it. So we got Chrome built. Oh, I shouldn't have done. I didn't want to do that. It's uploading. So my screen might get blurry here for a moment. I forgot to do it. I'll actually click finish. Anyway, so going back to apps, let's finally do the most, I will say the most complicated, but it's the most configurable option, and that is Win32 apps. And basically any exe installer, any MSI installer, anything that you want to deploy, you can do it. You can do a bash script if you want it. You can deploy with this Win32, this Windows app. It doesn't have to be a exe. It just has to be. You have to be able to wrap it up into a particular container. So the biggest thing you got to know is if you're doing Windows 32 or exe apps, you have to package it into an Intune Win file. And down here, converting to Win32 app content, you need to go get the prep tool. Prep tool is over here on GitHub. Click download. It's small. It's a small file. And then what you have to do is just run that to build your Intune Win file. So if I switch to downloads, exe, it does have flags, so you can automate this. You can type in the source, where the installer is, what the name of the installer is, and where you're saving the file out to. You can just have it all scripted and automated if you want. I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to show the wizard that it has. So let's specify a source folder. In this case, can't auto tab complete. I'm going to deploy Audacity. Because if I go back over here to LouMug, I've got this Audacity folder and got an installer, which I'm going to need here in a moment. The name of the installer, that's the name of the installer. Again, this could be like a bat file. If you were trying to deploy something and it had like multiple steps and you used bat files before, you can do that. It doesn't have to be an exe. That can be an MSI for that matter too. Now I'm just going to output it to my current folder, delete the copy of it that I've already created. No, I don't want to create a catalog. And it creates a file. So here is my Intune Win file. It literally just took everything in that folder and packaged it. Why we couldn't just use a zip file, I don't know. And why can't we just upload the exe? I don't know. But we'll see because when you look at the process, you're like, that doesn't make any sense of the requirement. I'm sure there is. I'm sure it's there in the documentation, but it's just not something worth I was spending the time to find out why. It's just the way it is. So we're going to select our package file. Go up to LouMug. I'm going to pick Audacity. And it's already populated some things, so you can go in here and rename this stuff. And again, you have to add the publisher. You got to select an image. And then here, you're going to have to, just like you've done it with a configuration manager before with a script installer, anything that's not an MSI, you got to put in what the application name is and all the flags. In this case, we're just using very silent because that's what the documentation says for Audacity. I don't remember the uninstall command, so we'll just pretend it's uninstall. The install behavior, is it system context or is it user context? And, you can have different return codes if you're building custom applications. You want to know whether it was successful or not, you can do that. Requirements, you're always going to have to fill this in, whether or not you have to specify the architecture and the minimum OS level. I don't know of any application that I've deployed that requires anything newer than like Windows 10. So it's always like, you got to pick 1607, basically. The detection rules, again, if you've done this in a configuration manager, exact same process. You can do an MSI detection, a file registration, file detection, or a registry detection. Just for the sake of this, I'm just going to Audacity.exe. Just want to make sure it exists. And honestly, if I was doing this, I'd probably be using the registry for the install, under the uninstall key. But I have time to show that off. Does it have? Do you have to install any other applications first, just like configuration manager? Does it replace any other applications already deployed? And then finally your assignments, and finally click create, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to upload that file. And then finally, like I said, if you've got issues like with an MSI and the install context is wrong, you can go back through the Intune packager and package up an MSI file into an Intune Win file. And honestly, it's probably better you do that. I'll show you why. So there's my MSI that it's been packaged up into a Intune Win file. And it actually read the properties from the MSI installer and populated stuff. So it already populated the name. It already populated the description. It didn't get publisher for some reason. I don't know why. I can't type. But the app version, and you can fill that stuff in. And when you go to program, look, it's already populated the install command and the uninstall command. And if install behavior too. I thought that was selectable. Anyway, but regardless of that, you can do MSIs and it automatically fills this information in for you. You can, again, you have to specify the architecture and the minimum OS. And you're like, oh man, I need that uninstall GUID. I need that install GUID so I can do the detection rule. No, you don't. Because when you go do rule type MSI for an MSI install, it automatically populates it for you. And if you wanted to, you could actually check the version number, see if it's changed. But I feel like this gives you more control, especially if you've got an MSI and you need to add additional flag or transforms properties for that installer. Like I think even Chrome has some where you could actually, and I can't remember any off the top of my head, but if you've done the property equals enabled, stuff like that, you're going to have to package an MSI into an Intune win file so you get that ability to do that. You can't add extra flags to a line of business install. And that pretty much goes over the apps. Like I said, Android apps is pretty much the same as if you're installing from the store. It's the same as Windows. You have to go to the Play Store. You have to go get the URL. You have to go get the icon, and just manually add things yourself. So let's get into configuration profiles. And no, not app configurations. We got to go to devices, configuration profiles. Again, these are your GPOs, your mobile config files, your wicked package files. And if you're doing iPad or macOS, your options are kind of limited. You can do your email settings, your PKI settings, your VPN, your Wi-Fi. And again, if that doesn't cover what you need, you can go to custom, type in whatever you want. And then all you got to do is if you got a mobile config file from Profile Creator or from Apple Profile Manager, or if any of those other MDM tool platforms allow you to export configs, you can literally just import mobile config, which is just an XML file. You can import that here, and it'll fill all this in, and then you can deploy that to your device. And that's the same one. That's the same on the macOS side. You have a few extra options. Not a whole lot. But let's go look at Windows 10. And again, like I said, settings catalog. That is all the built-in administrative templates see through GPEdit on Windows computer. All of those are built in under here, under the settings catalog. You click on templates and you see this administrative templates. That's not the new stuff. That has a limited subset of settings. And I can guarantee you there's one setting in there there's one setting that will not be in there. But yeah, you can join a computer to the on-prem domain if you wanted to. I probably wouldn't do that, but your case might be different. Let me get into custom, because things you have to know about is what in the world is an OMA URI? I can't tell you. There's this document here, Understanding ADMX Policies, that tries to explain it. It still doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Well, it kind of does, but it's really stupid when I show you how to do it. So let's pretend I want to deploy Chrome settings from Intune. So first thing I need to do is I need to go get the templates. Actually, I need Notepad. So we have Chrome. So we need to go get the template. You go back over here to downloading Chrome for your enterprise. You can either do the bundle, which has it in there, or you can just download the ADMX policies. First thing you need to do, if you're wanting to configure Chrome, or any custom ADMX template, you need to import the template. And so when you're looking at this, it's like, hey, what's your OMA URI? I have no idea. The documentation here under this says there's you need to go blah, 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 blah. Luckily, Microsoft, or not Microsoft, but Google made it a little bit easier for you because they gave it, here it is. So it's a device policy. It's from vendor. You're going through vendor, Microsoft policy, configuration operations, ADMX install, and then the application and the policy and the Chrome ADMX. I don't know what defines that or that. I just go and copy it from whoever the template's from, because normally they have documentation about it. I actually have figured this out myself manually because of Edge. Your data type, it's going to be string. It's always going to be string. I haven't seen any documentation of anybody using these others. So let's just stick with string. And then finally, this is the ADMX file. So if I were to go to my policy templates, Windows, ADMX, Chrome, open this in Notepad++, this is what you get. It's an XML file. By the way, ADMX templates are XML files. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to paste it in. Save. All right. I now have my ADMX template in this config profile. Now, what are the now I want to actually configure some settings based on this template. So I'm going to add another one, and let's pretend I'm going to I'm going to enable the bookmarks. All right, so I need to get some information. So back over here at Chrome, they have a really simple example of showing the homepage button. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to copy this first piece of this OMI URI. I'm going to go back over here. Notes, okay. I'm going to paste it in here. I'm now going to go back to my ADMX template, and now I need to find bookmark bar enable. Here it is. I gotta go. I'm running out of time. I'm trying to go fast. So bookmark bar enable. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to paste it because the next thing I need to know is it part of a parent category? And when you're looking at parent categories, what that means is it under a folder? When you're looking at the GPOs in here, is it under one of these folders? So if you're to look at the template, this Google Chrome is that reference. I would scroll back up there, but I'm running out of time. So let's go back here. Oh, new. All right. So that's basically the directory structure. So I'm going to take Chrome, that bookmark bar enabled. That's my OMA URI. Back over here. Now my data type is a string. And if I look at the ADMX template, like it's enable or disable. That's the two options. How do I know what I use? If you go back over here, there's understanding ADMX. Go down to samples. It has text elements, multi-text elements, list elements, no elements. That's basically what we have. And all we need is an enable or disable property. So go back over here, enabled, save. Well, that's what that looks like. That's for turning on and off a policy. That's the easy method. That's one of the easy ones. Let's say we wanted to set the home page. Go back to this, go find. No. Restore on start. All right. So let's say we wanted to restore on startup URLs. This is what would show when Chrome opens up. I gotta go steal the name. I gotta steal the name. And again, I'm going to start with basically that. If I go back here, my parent category is different. It's actually startup. And if I were to go back up to the top, startup would be, it would be Google Chrome, and then it'd be startup, and then the actual property. That's my URI. Each data type, again, it's a string. It's going back to the ADMX template. It is a list. I'm going to copy that out. What do I do with a list? Over here to this guy, go down, we find list. You take note of this Unicode character separator. We look at the example, and basically we got to turn it on, and then we got a data ID. I go back and get ID name. Value is equal to 1, and I got to get that little separator. And now it is I'll look right in my notes. If that looks right. Okay, that's my data. And that's it. So now I've built it. Again, we can do assignments. We have to assign to users or devices. We can define whether or not it is based on the OS version and create. So that's all I had time for on demos. I've been running, it ran long like I expected I would. Getting back to Garrett's question, how do you approach remote assistance in Intune? thing we're looking at right now is in Windows, there's this thing called Quick Assist. Not to be confused with the old remote assist feature in anything before Windows 10. This worked really, really well. We've been testing it internally. We do use TeamViewer as well, but we've kind of taken the approach of if it's an Azure AD joined computer, we would use Quick Assist rather than TeamViewer, so we don't have to deploy out TeamViewer. That's all I've got. I will hand it back over to Leah and Craig, and so we can give away some stuff.
Looks like we got one more question for you, Tony.
Okay. Is Quick Assist baked into Intune, or is it just separate? Quick Assist is baked into Windows 10 and newer. It is not an Intune feature. It is not a third-party feature. It's not an add-on. It is actually baked into Windows. Why we haven't heard about this a lot more in the recent years, I have no idea. But yeah, it's basically like TeamViewer. It supports the getting through NATs and stuff. It takes care of that, and you don't have to worry about the whole licensing thing because it's built into Windows.
So you've got another question there.
Oh, does it use RDP? It's probably using the same stuff in the back end, but it is, like I said, it's able to do it's able to do get through network translation layers. Like if you've got a computer on somebody's personal computers at home, you can use Quick Assist from your home to their computer, just like you've done with TeamViewer for the past 10+ years.
Anyone else have any questions for Tony? I'm not seeing anything come in. All right. Let's give a round of applause for Tony. Thank you, Tony, for presenting yet again. Lots of good info.
Well, I'm going to drink water now.
So our raffle winner, which I have chosen randomly by picking who is in attendance and then doing a random number generator, is Aaron Harvey. Aaron, are you here?
Must be present to win.
Be present to win.
Great job, Tony. Nice demos too.
Aaron, going once.
Aaron, chat, raise your hand, or
going
speak.
Twice. Please don't make me do this again.
Hold on.
All right, I'll pick a backup while we wait. Random number generator. 1, 2, 49, 16. Freddie Claypool, are you here? Yay. Freddie Claypool with that Bellarmine prize-winning luck. All right, Freddie. I'll drop you a line so I can get your shipping address.
I have a disco party at Bellarmine now.
I know it. All right. Well,
Freddie works remote now, so we'll have to see it from behind him at his house.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate the attendance and participation in the chat, and thank you to all the newbies who came. I hope you got a lot of value out of this and you'll start making it part of your monthly routine. And again, thank you to Tony and Bellarmine for all the support that they give us in putting this event on. Next month, we are going to be talking about Windows 11 and we're going to be talking about Windows Server 2022. And we are going to do that on December 17th. So it is a week early just because we got the holidays. So make sure you pencil us in. Invites will probably come out not next week because it's Thanksgiving week, but the following. So you'll start getting evites for that pretty soon. As always, you can email me or Craig if you have questions, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend and a safe and happy Thanksgiving.